Hello again everybody, and welcome to another Carizon video. And yes, as the title suggests, I am looking to boost my car. This is going to be the first video in a series of videos where I'm going to talk about the preparations I'm making in order to go forced induction on my 370Z. I'm going to talk about what I've already done to the car in order to get it prepared, and talk about my plans as far as what sort of forced induction kit I'm going to be looking at. Now, I've always wanted to drive a boosted vehicle. It's always sort of been a dream of mine, and I figured that the 370Z would probably be Now, I have always wanted to drive a forced induction vehicle, and the 370Z is actually the perfect car to do this in. The stock block from the factory is capable of handling numbers of up to 600 wheel horsepower with nothing but bolt-ons. Most users that I see on the Z forums don't need to do anything internally to the engine. They just bolt on the Supercharger or Turbocharger of choice, and they're capable of hitting numbers between 500 and 600 horsepower fairly easily. As far as the numbers I'm going to be looking at, I would love to be able to hit probably around 500 wheel horsepower. That's sort of like the pipeline dream of any person who's gone forced induction on their vehicles before. So that's the number that I'm aiming to hit. I am leaning towards doing a Supercharger kit of some sort, and the most obvious choice would probably be to go with the still-in Supercharger kit. This kit's been around for something like 10 years now, so it's already proven itself as far as reliability goes. The still-in Supercharger is a ProCharger style of Supercharger. That means that the Supercharger itself looks a lot like a turbo. The numbers that they claim it can hit are around 420 with just their stock kit, but it can be upgraded to be able to reach the 500 wheel horsepower that I'm looking for. The other major selling point of the still-in kit is the fact that it has passed carb emission testing. The carb emission testing means that it allows the still-in kit to be driven in all 50 US states. It's legal to drive. And that would be really convenient for me, because that means that if I decide to move, I could still keep the Supercharger kit, or if I decide I need to sell it, it would make it a lot easier to sell as well. Now, the only problem with going with the still-in kit is the fact that a good friend of mine is looking at installing the same kit himself, and I consider myself a fairly competitive person, so if he ends up installing it before I do, I might need to try and one-up him as far as performance goes, and so I might need to look at some other options. If I want to stick with the ProCharger style of Superchargers, I do know that GTM also has a couple of different stages of ProCharger kits that I can buy, but I'm not as familiar with GTM's products, and the horsepower ratings that they claim on their products are a little bit higher than what I'm looking for. They're usually in the 550 to 600 range. So if I decide I still want to go the Supercharger route, I could decide to go for a Whipple style Supercharger, because a company called RJM Manufacturing is about to release a new Whipple Supercharger for the 370Z. This is the first Whipple Supercharger that has ever been made for this car, and the thing looks absolutely insane. Here are a few pics that I've stolen off of the 370Z forums. I will leave the poster's name in the description below. The thing looks absolutely epic. It sticks up out of the hood, sort of like they did with the old muscle cars, but that's sort of the case with any Whipple Supercharger, because it does sit right on top of the block. It does mean you have to cut a hole in the hood, and that's something I'd be a little apprehensive about. Now, besides the fact that I would have to cut a hole in my hood, there is also the issue of price. The Whipple Supercharger costs around 10 grand, whereas the still-in kit would run me about 7 to 8 grand. But it does promise higher horsepower numbers, and the thing just looks badass, so it's another possible option for me if I decide not to go for the still-in kit. Now, I am really leaning towards going the Supercharger route, but I haven't dismissed turbos completely yet. I have looked at a kit or two just to kind of get some options, and if I were to go the Turbocharger route, I would definitely do twin turbo over single turbo. Going with a twin turbo setup means I can run 2 smaller spools, and that will allow them to spool up more quickly, and I hopefully wouldn't see as much turbo lag. Going with the twin turbo setup does mean a little more maintenance in terms of having to take care of 2 separate turbo housings, but it also means that the install should hopefully be a little bit easier, because I'm not having to run the exhaust headers to one single turbo. They will be running to separate turbos, which means I can just mount them directly on top of the exhaust headers, and hopefully running the intake piping will be a little bit easier with a twin turbo setup as well. As far as twin turbo kits that I've looked at, I've really only looked at Fast Intentions product. The reason for that is because I've already owned Fast Intentions products before, and I've been really happy with the quality so far, so I figured I would stick with what I knew. So with their kit, however, I will have to give up the resonated test pipes that I have installed, as you can hear now. And I really don't want to give them up, because I do love the sound of these things, But in order to be able to install a turbo kit, you do need to install a modified exhaust system that would run all the way down to the X pipe. So that's kind of a drawback because I really don't want to give up the exhaust system that I currently have, and with a Supercharger kit I wouldn't need to modify it at all. So that's one of the things that's really holding me back from going the turbo route. But I am still considering it with the Superchargers. I haven't dismissed turbos completely yet. Now, before I can install any of these kits, there is a lot of prep work that does need to go into getting the Z ready for forced induction. Some of this work I've already started. I have installed test pipes in the car that eliminates the catalytic converters. The issue with catalytic converters is it does put an obstruction inside the exhaust side, and when you're running forced induction, you do have higher exhaust pressures and velocities, and those tend to blow out the platinum catalysts that are inside the catalytic converters. So by deleting the catalytic converters and putting in test pipes, it opens up the exhaust a little bit, allows it to flow more freely, and you don't run the risk of blowing out the catalysts. There are, of course, a list of other things that I still need to get done to this car in order to be able to prepare it for forced induction, and one of those things is installing a new clutch and flywheel combo. The stock clutch that comes in the 370Z is not meant to handle 500 wheel horsepower, so the clutch will need to be upgraded. The clutches I'll be looking at will be street performance clutches. I really just need something that can handle the power, but is still capable of being driven around as a daily driver. So that'll be one of the things I probably do last. I'm going to let the current clutch that I have wear out a little bit more before I decide to replace that. I do also need to go with a better wheel and tire setup. The current stock tires will probably have issues putting down the power, so I'm looking at going with wider tires in the back, probably 285 or 305 width tires, and then I'll do something else in the front. I'm not completely decided yet. Those things will be coming up probably here in the next 6 months or so. I am also looking at upgrading my differential. I do have the base model's open diff, but I will be looking at upgrading it to a viscous limited slip differential, though this is probably not 100% necessary in order to be able to handle 500 horsepower. I am looking for some better feel on the track, especially when powering out of corners. The limited slip diff will allow for better traction on the track. But the next thing that I will be doing to prepare this car for forced induction is actually being delivered to my house in the mail right now. In fact, I'm about to head home so I can go and sign for this package. You guys will be finding out what that is in the next video, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Anyways, guys, that's all I have for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I am really excited about getting this build underway. I hope you guys are too. If you disagree with anything I've said, just destroy me down in the comments below, and I look forward to hearing from you guys and hearing your feedback. If you want to follow along with me on this build, you guys will be able to learn from my mistakes, maybe even get some ideas for your car. Give it the thumbs up, subscribe down below, and I will see y'all in the next video. Later.